What's going on, everybody? We're back. Episode number 180 of the Club and Sub podcast. Joshua said, what kind of weed am I smoking? Picking Ricky. I am smoking something right now. I don't know what kind it is, though. It looks like you did right before.
Oh, no, I didn't. You just say that after the pod or well before.
Yeah. But guys, we're back this week. Drop a like and subscribe if you like the show and help us out. This time I'm going to get it right, and next week I will get an appropriate banner. But we're brought to you guys by Fight Numbers. One of the best spots in the game. They are great. If you want to follow, if you want bets, they have Pepe, Evan, and Ozzy all working for them. You can get those there. But honestly, the most intriguing part of Fight Numbers and what I use it the most for is they have a live odds screen. Like if you go to fightodds.io or Best Fight Odds, obviously you can see the odds for every fight, but they actually have every domestic and offshore book there on that odds screen live during the seconds. If you want a discount there, Lags, what's the discount? Can you remind me?
Yes, so the code is CLUB, CLUB in all capitals, and that is going to get you 30% off. And another tool that's very helpful on their site as well, because a lot of people are looking at, what's the best line on, let's say Ludovic Klein by KO. You go on that site, you can look Klein by KO, and they will show you every single book that's offering and the line, so you can line shop perfectly.
Yeah, that's it. Fightnumbers.com, promo code CLUB. Great guys over there. John Kelly, served overseas, great people. Great cappers working for him. Great product. Join it up. Use the promo code CLUB. Anyway, briefly on last week, I won 0.53 units. Legs, I think small loss, you said, right?
Yes, small loss, 1.35 units, mainly on Almeida showing probably the worst takedown defense he's displayed in his career. And then the main event, obviously, going to round 5. That ends a little earlier. It's a 4-unit swing, so it is what it is. Yeah,
so I would have got more into it, but we have 14 fights on this slate. And so we're going to jump right in here. First fight of the night. We got debutante Pooja Tomar. She is an Indian, and she is making her UFC debut at 8-4. Don't totally know why, but that's where we are. She is taking on Rayan Amanda, or depending on where you look at her name, Rayan dos Santos. So we're just going to call her Rayan. Rayan. I don't know. It's tough sledding all the way around here. Anyway, current price, Rayan minus 300. Come back on Tomar plus 250. Honestly, I was looking at it and at minus 200. And I was like, I might lay the chalk on Rayan here. And I was just like, I really don't think it's the kind of fight you want to lay chalk on. But also, Pooja just seems so bad to me, man. But then fortunately, someone hit the line and it moved, so I don't have to think about it. It's currently Rayan minus 300. I think it's probably lined appropriately. Pooja Tomar hasn't really fought a high-level competition. The best comp she fought was in 1. She didn't fare too well over there. Good kick game. She's knocked out a few women, but mostly really low level. That's probably the best part of her game. A lot of really good leg kicks. Doesn't kick the calf. It's more just upper thigh. But she'll stay on him, and she throws him hard. Beyond that, there's just not much of her game to like. Very little defense in the pocket. Easy to get cracked. If you ground this woman, she's got really nothing off her back. No real submission defense. Rayan's obviously 0-1 in the UFC and lost to Denise Gomes, who we'll talk about shortly in her Contender Series fight. But she carries decent power in her hands, good athlete. When she wants to go to it, she's a pretty good grappler. Obviously, way more experience. She's fought and beaten a much higher level of competition than Pooja. I honestly, I think she's better everywhere. But, Rayan doesn't wrestle that proactively. So she has the propensity to make this closer than it needs to be. But with that said, I think she's going to sub her. And I think if she gets on top of her for any length of time, that's probably a wrap. But she should win this everywhere. What are your thoughts, Legs?
Yeah, when I was first taping it, similar to you, it opened minus 180, and I'm like, it's probably not bad. I kind of wish, Rayan grappled a little bit more, kind of like you touched on right at the end there. And then it's like, well, the line got absolutely smoked over $1. And then so, yeah, I don't think there's much thinking I need to do.
Yeah, that was it. So, Moving on. This is an interesting fight. Cody Staman, Taylor Lapis. Current price, Taylor Lapis minus 268. The comeback on Staman plus 228. What are your thoughts here, Legs?
I was saying a little earlier today that, I do wish Cody Staman, obviously in this matchup, he would wrestle more. I mean, that's kind of the big knock on him. He doesn't shoot a high amplitude number of takedowns, but Lapis being over 70% to me doesn't make a ton of sense. The guy doesn't have a ton of power, doesn't really separate much. His takedown defense in general is pretty suspect. I think Cody's just going to make it a close fight. We could get screwed on the judges' scorecards, but plus 220 to me doesn't make a ton of sense. I'm going to have a small bet on Cody.
Yeah, I'm considering it. You know what's interesting? I feel most of what I've heard in terms of the bear case for Staman is, he doesn't wrestle that proactively. But like when you actually go back and look at, his recent sample, like his last 6 fights, he fought Jimmy Rivera, who he tried to take down a lot. Jimmy, obviously just an elite takedown defensive player. Next fight, he fought Moura. I mean, he tried to wrestle. He did grapple with Moura a fair amount. Moura just kind of too much for him. Next fight after that, Said Nurmagomedov. Cody did attempt 2 takedowns in about a minute of fight time and got caught in a guillotine on one of them and subbed. Next fight after that, Eddie Wineland. He knocked him out in under a minute. Then he fights Lewin Lacerda. Lacerda, obviously dangerous jiu-jitsu guy. He had no real need to take that to the floor. The big red flag is Douglas DeAndrade, who he only attempted 5 takedowns against. And, the one time he actually got on top of Douglas, he had a decent amount of success. And it's concerning because he kind of accepted, just being outstruck for long portions of the fight on the outside. But, I actually think Cody is pretty likely to attempt takedowns here. What's interesting about the fight, to your point, I think Taylor's a pretty good fighter, a good kickboxer, good hands. He's very long, fast, good athlete, but he doesn't have the kind of style that, inherently covers these prices. Like obviously he can against a low enough level of opponent, like when he beat Nate Manas, for instance, but he's only medium volume really. He doesn't have any real offensive grappling to write home to. As a defensive grappler, he's got solid get-ups. He's good at not getting stuck on bottom. But I don't think he is great at actually defending takedowns themselves. And something I've noticed repeatedly with him is he gets stuck on the fence very, very easily. And yeah, so like I look at the fight and I sort of think him having a relatively strong amount of success against Basharat in the defensive grappling is likely coloring the line a bit here. Where I think the line's kind of being mispriced is I don't think he's minus 250 standing, not even close to it personally. Cody was a Golden Glove boxer. He's very, very fast. He's a very good athlete. The only guy in his career to really give Cody the business on the feet was Jimmy Rivera. And Jimmy, at his peak was like a top 3 or 4 guy at bantamweight. So I feel like the market is saying Cody Staman isn't going to get a lot of control and isn't likely to compete striking, but he competes with almost everyone striking. And conversely, like Taylor Lapis, this guy went to a decision with Josh Hill, a split decision with Josh Hill, who in my opinion is a far worse version of Cody Staman and who's never made the UFC, not in the not too distant past. He has shown, an inability to get off the cage. His fight with Callan Loughran, I mean, that was his debut in his second go-round. It was a very, very competitive fight. He won the striking, but he wasn't like running away with it by any means, to be honest, with that fight. And yeah, I just look at it and I'm like, Cody's a lot better than Callan Loughran, and Taylor Lapis was minus 150 in that fight. Cody can get 3 to 4 takedowns here or just control him against the fence. But even on the feet, I feel like most of Taylor's finishing equity in this fight would be him like snatching a guillotine, like similar to what Said did, but he's way worse at submission grappling than Said is. So like, I feel like finishing equity's low. I think Cody will probably get on the front foot, and I think he's got the grappling upside. I do favor Taylor just because I don't really think Cody's consolidating top, and I think Taylor is the better striker. I just have a hard time imagining many iterations of this where Cody looks worse than like plus 150. So I'll probably eventually get there in a shot. My biggest concern is like everybody I've talked to seems to have the same view of the fight. And if that's the case, why is the line moved all the way out to Taylor minus 270? Like that is a bit of a concern. But the line does seem to be wide to me. Moving on, though. Have a bet here. Eduardo Moura taking on Denise Gomes. I bet Gomes at plus 145. I don't know. I mean, Moura's from the same camp as Jailton Almeida, and maybe it turns out that she's as good as Jailton Almeida is, and she just runs through Denise. I suppose that's a possibility. Something I noticed about that camp, though, which I kind of found concerning, especially given that, that Eduarda is 30 years old. There's like no female fighters there. There's like one maybe. And if you look at all her training videos, all of that, she's not training with female fighters. And it kind of explains to me, like, when you see this woman on her feet, she looks very, very uncomfortable there. She just wants to shoot and get you down as fast as possible. And I mean, that's a great base for MMA. But the truth is, the only kind of women she's fought so far are turbo cans. The best fighter she's fought is Montserrat Ruiz, who belongs nowhere near the UFC. She's barely fought out of round one, I think only once in her career, if I'm not mistaken. So her cardio is a bit of an unknown. Her striking looks bad. We don't know if she's going to be one of these Brazilian jiu-jitsu players where she just plays on her back if she gets stuck on bottom, or if Denise kind of reverses her. And conversely, like Denise Gomes, I think, the general narrative is Denise is a really bad wrestler because Angie and Loma both grappled her a bunch. But a couple of things. For one, in the Loma fight, she had about a round of control herself. The biggest mistake she made in that fight was trying to throw up submissions off her back, and she paid for it. In the Angie Hill fight, I thought her get-ups looked significantly improved. She worked up off every takedown pretty easily in that fight. And she's been doing grappling tournaments. I almost feel like it's the kind of fight. And then on top of that, it's like, dude, like I'd favor Loma and Angela Hill against Eduardo Moura, like pretty easily, to be honest. Yeah. So like, it's like apples to oranges when we're comparing those fights. And Denise, whatever you want to say about her tape, she's 24 years old. She's actually at like a really good gym with a lot of good grapplers at that gym. Mariana Moraes is there. Jessica Andrade is there. Obviously her fiance, Carol Hosa, is there. Just a lot of people and a lot of bodies to train with. And I think she's making improvements. Plus she's the rare type of female fighter who has real knockout power and real durability. So to me, maybe Eduardo covers his price because she gets takedowns and controls her. But if she has bad gas, she's probably in trouble. If Denise can work up, she's probably in trouble. If Denise gets on top, there's a reasonable chance she's in trouble. On top of which, she's a terrible striker, and Denise hits really, really hard. She has fought nobody, and Denise has fought pretty good fighters in the UFC to date and has more experience. I just feel like the line is looking at her performance against Loma and being like, oh, yeah, this giant Brazilian who's been grappling bums is going to come in here and grapple her. I'm happy to take the shot on the woman with elite hardware who's fought way better competition and is way younger. What do you think?
So we're going to butt heads a little bit here. Not that I'm looking to bet more by any means. I'm actually looking to bet violence in this fight. But I just more so think it is a bad stylistic matchup for Denise. Just because, I mean, even watching the early takedowns from Angie Hill, they weren't great shots by any means. She was getting her down relatively easy. Now, obviously, like you said, got up very, very good get-ups. But to me, the level of takedowns that Angie's shooting weren't that great, and I think Moura probably can hold her down. And so where I feel, basically, if Moura can keep her on the mat, I think she probably does find a finish. And conversely, I think she probably does have bad cardio. Like you mentioned, her striking is very questionable. I think she could get put out herself if she stays standing on the feet. So I like violence here and almost pick them.
Yeah, that's fair. I get it. I think Denise is going to knock her out personally, but we will see what happens. Moving on, Daniel Marcos, John Castaneda, current price. I think the money's coming back in on Marcos right now. Yeah, Marcos minus 120, come back on Cast plus 100. What do you think, Lex?
Probably my biggest spot of the card so far. I like Castaneda here, unit and a half at minus 102, and I think we're going to have a lot of similar talking points. But for me, the main talking point is going to be the southpaw nature of Castaneda. Marcos, his main weapons are the jab and the calf kick. And like the last time he fought a southpaw was 5 years ago, this Roy Kesby guy. And it was an awful fight. I mean, he barely got any of his calf kicks going. The guy was looking to grapple him for the most part. And Marcos, for the better part of that fight, was just looking to blitz into range and found himself in the clinch. And if he finds himself in the clinch against Castaneda, I think Castaneda has a big grappling edge here. I think he can more than hang on the feet, and I think he's got the better cardio. So to me, Castaneda has the much bigger ceiling, and I feel like Marcos' best ceiling, I don't know what, maybe minus 160, minus 170. Like, I don't see him finishing Castaneda at a big clip, and I don't see him separating at a huge clip either. So, yeah.
Real quick before I address this fight, Lou asked if Moura is good looking.
No.
Lou, dude, go to the eye doctor, man. Like, what is going on here?
I feel like Moura feels like more in like the Sarah Froda category.
Yeah.
No,
I have a lot. I have a
Lee.
lot of bets, a lot of decent sized bets on this card, and this is my biggest. I have 4 units. John Castaneda plus 115 here. Yeah, a lot of what you said when it came to the Southpaw thing. I feel like Daniel Marcos. He's getting a lot of credit, but like when you contextualize his fights, obviously the Peruvian regionals were a total shit show. So who really cares? Simone Oliveira, who spent pretty much 5 minutes just throwing spinning stuff, gassed out, got finished. Next fight, he fights Davy Grant, lost that fight, even though he didn't. But if you watch that fight, he lost that fight pretty comfortably. On top, and something I noticed in that fight is, Grant didn't stand in front of him the entire fight. Like, he basically would just blitz him on entries. And Marcos, he just doesn't counter well. He didn't have a whole lot of answers for that. And Grant easily outlanded him. Back end of that fight, Marcos gassed out hard in round 3. Grant was putting it on him. And like the pace was not even particularly high in that fight. He gassed out on Contender Series with Brandon Lewis as well. Obviously, he did great against Arichi Lang, but Arichi Lang just stood directly in front of him the entire fight. He was just kind of easy to pick apart. Castaneda, on the other hand, he's a guy who likes to play the inside-out game. He counters well off misses, which I think Marcos is there for. You touched on the southpaw thing. I think the cardio gap is pretty big here. I'm still kind of skeptical of Marcos' wrestling. I just don't think we've seen enough to draw any firm conclusions, but I haven't seen anything great. And Castaneda out-grappling Kang in the manner he did, I think is pretty bullish for him here. And then, like, the last thing here, I wouldn't say the biggest, but one of the bigger things I mentioned, Marcos, he deserved to lose to Grant. And if you take that fight away, all you have is Simone Oliveira and Aori Quileng. Castaneda's got 2 extra fights. He's fought way better guys in the UFC. He's shown he belongs here. He's shown that he's probably a top 25 guy. I haven't seen anything like that from Marcos. And the history of these Peruvian guys, when they've stepped up in competition over the last year or so, has been pretty horrific, to be honest. So maybe Marcos bucks the trend, but given the cardio dynamic, the grappling dynamic, the southpaw dynamic, I feel like as a floor, you kind of have to make Castaneda minus 150 here. So I'm on him big.
Yeah, I was going to say last thing too. I mean, even in that Oliveira fight, Marcos was an underdog.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I know he hasn't really shown us a whole lot here, and he's being priced as an elite prospect. Whereas, based on what I see people saying about him, it seems that's the general view of Daniel Marcos. And maybe I'll be wrong. He seems like a tough kid. He's obviously got a chin and he's game, but I just don't think we've seen much to really back that up. And Castaneda is a guy who seems like even at his age now, seems to be getting better with every passing fight. So, yeah.
I would say a lot of good wins for Castaneda. The Kang win, like you talked about, the Gafurov win, like that's way better than anything that Marcos has done.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, Tristan, James Lontop. We had that guy Borjas who fought a couple weeks ago. Who's the one that fought Padilla? No, not to Spain. Padilla fought that other Bahuelos. All these Peruvian guys, they come over here and they just show that they have nothing off their backs. Maybe Marcos is the exception because he's been in the United States for a couple of years, but I'm not really sure if that's true. Moving on, shit fight. I think, do you have a bet here? I'm not sure. We got Andrea Lee, Montana De La Rosa, current price, Lee minus 160, De La Rosa plus 140. What are your thoughts here?
I'll say this, though, even though you thought I might have had a bet. Early in the week, I was looking to bet. I was thinking, you know what? Yeah. Lee might be the side early in the week. I think she's obviously the better striker here, and De La Rosa in general is probably not going to hold her down. But then the more I look at this, I feel like Lee's striking, if anything, has stayed the same or regressed, whereas De La Rosa, her striking's not good by any means, but has definitely improved since their first fight. So I think the line's probably fine where it's at. Lee is the favorite, better striker, and she's probably not going to be held down.
Yeah, it's funny because I had the reverse feelings at the start of the week and have kind of 180 on it. Oh, because Andrea Lee getting outstruck by Miranda Maverick to me. I thought Maverick was going to win that fight. I did going into it, but I thought it was just going to be via wrestling. Her doubling her up at distance is really awful. And obviously Lee kind of put up a tepid, non-aggressive performance the fight before against Natalia Silva. A performance that, frankly, I think had Lee been 5 or 6 years younger would have looked very, very different. I just think Lee is clearly getting older and is not the same fighter. And so it was Montana's obviously improved since their first fight. The plus money might be interesting. But then I thought about it some more. I saw Lee mention she had COVID when she fought Maverick. Who knows if it's true or not? But you watch their first fight, and the question is, has Lee deteriorated enough and Montana improved enough that she could offset that big of a gap in the striking? My guess is no. Lee just had her way. I think she outlanded her like 70-14 on the feet. It was something really, really ugly. And even if you expect Lee regression and some Montana progression here, I mean, I don't think I would make Andrea Lee a dog to JJ Aldrich at this point in her career. And Montana De La Rosa just got firmly outstruck by her. So I think Lee will outstrike her. I don't think Montana's top game or wrestling is nearly as good as any of the women who have taken or held down Andrea Lee in the past. Obviously, Montana took her down a few times in the first fight, but didn't really have much success controlling her. I think Lee 60 to 65% here is probably fine. I have the same concerns with Andrea regarding, where she's at in her career, but it's really quite a friendly fight for her. What are your thoughts?
Already gave my thoughts, but the last thing I was gonna.
Oh, sorry.
You're good. You're good. Little too high on the pendulum there, John. But Lee, you were right. 73-14.
Yeah. So not great.
No.
Moving on. Bit of a shit show here. Brad Katona taking on Jesse Butler. Probably going to be the first and last time in Brad Katona's UFC career. He's line minus 625. That's what we have here, though. The comeback on Butler plus 450. Thoughts here, Lags?
Not much at all. I do think that Katona probably does end up winning a decision here, though. I think that's pretty much the whole, controversy. Does he find a finish? Does he win a decision? I think he probably does win by decision unless he grapples harder than I've ever seen him, really. I mean, I think he can submit Butler, but I think this probably goes to decision.
Yeah, before props came out, my mindset was I'm going to try to play Katona by KO because it'll probably be underpriced, versus it. But it's not. It's the same price as his sub. They're both plus 450.
Ooh.
Yeah. I'm kind of interested in the under. I don't know if I'll bet it or not. I am wary about trying to get cute on an under with a guy like Brad Katona who's got pillow fists. But Jesse Butler is really just awful. I don't have a lot to say about this fight. Katona should own, to Lags' point. It's a question of, do you like an over or under or just pass? For me, it's probably just going to be a pass here. Again, my instinct is Katona subs him here. I think people forget once upon a time Brad Katona subbed Bryce Mitchell. So yeah, that's the direction I lean here. But yeah, there will be a lot asked, why do they match fighters like here? No one fucking knows. Glimbot saying KO 2-3 for Brad Katona. I could see it. I could see him finishing this either way.
So KO 2 is 14-1, KO 3 is 16-1.
Still not great for a method plus. Is that 2-3 or is that?
No, that's 2-3. So
2-3 KO. Oh my god.
KO 2 is 14-1. Yeah, KO 3 is 16-1.
Yeah, that's kind of like AIDS, to be honest. I have no interest.
Yeah. Yep.
Moving on, we got Charles Radkey. He's taking on Carlos Prattes. Current price, Prattes minus 230. Comeback on Radkey plus 195. Seen a lot of Radkey love this week from some of the circles we chat in.
You cut out. I can't hear you.
Oh God, there was an ad.
Oh, there you go.
There was an ad on Tapology, and it was just like music in my ears for a second.
Oh, gotcha.
Anyway, I've seen a fair amount of Radkey love this week. I don't want to say I don't get it, because I do get it. I don't think it's warranted, though, to be frank. Carlos Radkey, obviously, he is coming off the first 2 wins in the UFC. He beat Blood Diamond, who cares? And then he knocked out Gilbert Urbina, who kind of sucks, so who cares? But apparently a lot of people have put a lot of stock in that fight. I think Radkey's okay. He's kind of a plotter, but he seems, tough. Comes forward, ready to bang. He'll grapple from time to time. Decent jiu-jitsu. Seems like a lower tier fighter to me in the UFC. I don't really see much of a ceiling for not Danny Radkey. Fucking Steen's talking about Danny in the comments over here, and he's got me going Danny Radkey. Chuck Buffalo, yeah. On the other side, it's Carlos Prattes, and like last fight, Carlos Prattes was like minus 300 against Trevin Giles. You want to know what my take is? I'd make Trevin Giles like minus 150 to minus 185 against Charles Radkey. I would. And I say that because it's very easy, again, to compare like apples to oranges here. Radkey's off 2 KOs. He's pretty good. Everybody knocks out Giles, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. But like Radkey just fought 2 bums. Like Trevin Giles is a guy with 12 UFC fights who's super fast, super athletic, and hits really, really hard and can grapple. And so the question is, obviously the Prattes price with Giles was a bit off. The question is how far. And it was off, but I think, Prattes, you probably have to make a favorite just off his finishing equity. But in terms of this fight, and I brought up Giles just because I am not really at all convinced that Radkey can have the kind of success Giles did. Giles went forward hard in that fight. He was jabbing him a lot. I don't think Radkey has a jab anywhere near as good as Giles. I don't think he has the speed that Giles has. He doesn't cover distance nearly as fast as he does, which, all of that allowed Giles to kind of get inside and have big success against Prattes. I am pretty skeptical that Radkey can, one, have that success striking. Can he have it grappling? Possibly, but I don't think it's going to be easy to take Prattes down. I really don't, man. He's fucking big, and he gets off his back really well. And Prattes, I think he's a much better striker. I do. I know he looked bad in the Giles fight, but like I said, Giles is better than Charles Radkey. I feel like Prattes is going to beat his ass on the feet. Like Prattes is by far the best striker Radkey's ever fought. He's taller, he's longer, he's faster. He's a way better athlete. I don't know. I'm not laying minus 230 at 30 on Prattes, obviously, but I kind of think people are looking at Radkey getting 2 wins and are like, oh, Trevin Giles fought Prattes close. It's got to be Radkey. I really don't think so. I think Prattes is going to finish him here. What do you think, Lags?
I think to that point first, I think a lot of people just undervalue Officer Trevin Giles and his skill set. Don't get me wrong.
He's only lost to elite fighters other than Prattes.
Yeah. But no, I kind of fall in a similar boat as you as well, because I just don't think Radkey's a great grappler. Even going into the Blood Diamond fight, this is a sketchy fight. The guy doesn't wrestle a ton. This could be close. Obviously, it didn't end up being close on the feet, but I don't think he's going to be able to easily grapple Prattes early in this fight. I think the knees, the front kicks up the middle. He has a lot of dangerous attacks. Prattes does up the middle. I think those absolutely could damage Radkey here. And honestly,
Radkey's pretty soft to the body, honestly.
Yeah, and he landed 4 or 5 good knees to Giles right in the body. So I think I would rather look for an under here, like an under 2.5 parlay of violence. I think this fight finishes.
What is the? I actually don't mind the under 1.5, to be honest. What is
1.5? 2.5's minus 165.
Prattes KO is only plus 100. It's not that great. I kind of agree with that. Yeah, I wait. What did you say? Minus 165 for the 2.5?
For the under
2.5. Legs wants to bet ITD Prattes.
No, I really don't.
I kind of want to bet ITD Prattes. I'm not going to lay juice on an ITD, but I do think he's going to finish Radkey here personally. Moving on, we have Thiago Moises taking on Ludovic Klein. Thoughts here, Lags? Current price, Klein's a small favorite. I believe he is minus 127. The comeback on Thiago Moises plus 107. What are your thoughts?
Not a ton of thoughts. I think it mainly comes down to Moises being able to grapple Klein, and I don't think the guy shoots a ton of takedowns. I don't think he's a great wrestler. I think Klein can hang in the defensive grappling department early in the fight. The guy's a powerful striker. Again, he picks his shots pretty well. Not the highest of volume, but again, like I said there, picks his shots pretty well, pretty accurate. I think he owns Moises on the feet personally.
I strongly disagree with that take, to be honest with you.
That's fair.
I have 3 units, Moises plus 115 and 113. I feel like this is an enormous overcorrection, to be honest. Real quick, before I even say anything about the fight, here's Thiago Moises' UFC losses. Benoit Saint-Denis, Joe Alvarez, Islam Makhachev, Damir Ismagulov, Beneil Dariush. That's it. All of those guys are minus 500 against Ludovic Klein, except for maybe Joel Alvarez. He probably would not be. But I look at this fight and, the general consensus seems to be that Ludovic's going to easily outstrike him here. I'm a bit less convinced, to be honest. Ludovic's, his best striking performance in the UFC is obviously AJ Cunningham, but who really cares about that fight? AJ Cunningham is absolutely horrendous. other than that, he fought Herbert tight, but he was very low volume. Even the Mason Jones fight, he did knock Jones down. Jones is a punching bag though, and most of that fight was him kind of out grappling Jones. Got outstruck by Landwehr, outstruck by Trezano, went to a split decision with Devontae Smith. The guy just hasn't beaten everybody, and he's not nearly as experienced as Thiago either. I look at this fight, and I guess Ozzy just mentioned you could see it going to a split if it goes 15. And Brick Squad says, I am undervaluing the potential of a cuck moment. I am not undervaluing the potential of a cuck moment. I am very ready for it. But you look at the Southpaws Moises has fought, and he usually does okay against them. He beat Alexander Hernandez. Obviously, he fought Benoit in his last fight, but that's not really a good example here. My view is on the feet, it's probably going to be a low-volume kickboxing match. Maybe you lean Klein in that kind of fight, but I feel everybody keeps talking about Klein shots to the body, but Moises actually is a pretty nasty body kicker himself, and I think the open stance here could be pretty good for him. And, landing his own body kicks. I trust his cardio a bit more. I just kind of think it'll be close, but I feel Moises is operating on a bit of a higher level, especially on the counter, than any of the guys Klein has really fought in the UFC to date. And then when you factor in the grappling aspect, maybe Klein can keep it upright. I keep hearing about how good his takedown defense is this week. I want to know where is that footage, though? But, I want someone to – you tell me, Lags, where is it? I'd love to know. I'd love to know where the Klein's elite takedown defense take is coming from here.
I guess my only comment would be I think early in this fight, I think he's very fresh. Like when he is fresh, I think it's going to be tough to take him down. Don't get me wrong.
Maybe, but this isn't Mason Jones throwing judo throws, This isn't like he's not going to be trying to do judo trips here. And I think that could be true. I'm not saying it is or isn't true, to be clear. What I am saying, though, is the general consensus seems to be Ludovic Klein has elite takedown defense, and there is virtually zero on tape to suggest that is true, that I've seen at any rate. So maybe he does, but I'm not sure. And what I can tell you unequivocally is when this guy's on bottom, he's terrible. Like if Moises gets on top of him, he's going to run through him, in my opinion. Ozzy said sub 2-3. I kind of like that as well. Honestly, it kind of reminds me of the Melt Costa fight a bit. Ludovic's a bit more physical than Costa is, but I kind of think they bring a similar kind of tie game to the table with very similar tools. And Moises obviously dealt with him fairly easily. Yeah, I'm going to take the guy with more experience, who's fought better guys, beaten better guys, it's better grappling. Probably not going to get finished. At plus money here. Pretty big. I like Thiago.
All right.
Moving on. Throwing it to you here, Lags. Punahele Soriano. Coming back off being subbed by Dustin Stoltzfus, who we'll also talk about on this card. Taking on Miguel Bayza, coming back off of being KO'd twice in a row. Current price, Bayza minus 190. Comeback on Soriano, plus 165. What do you think?
So before talking about the matchup in general, I think both guys have just some red flags coming into the matchup. Soriano is moving down to 170, which could only be worse for his gas tank from what we saw at 185. Maybe, but I would have to assume.
I don't mean to cut you off, but I feel like that's something. I feel like that's something that I don't want to say we overrate or underrate. I'd love to see someone run data on cardio.
Yeah,
guys dropping weight classes, because it just seems like a lot. Like Chidi, for instance, going down a couple months ago, and then cardio looking like the best it's looked in the UFC.
Yeah, fair point there.
Anyway,
and then
proceed.
And then on Bayza taking the long layoff after getting knocked out.
Yeah,
honestly. To me, I said this earlier in the week, and this is how the fight plays down to me. Miguel Bayza, you have skilled without a chin, and then you have Puna, who is unskilled with a chin.
Yeah,
I think large portions of this fight, Bayza is going to dominate until he does potentially find himself getting knocked out. But I think he probably does end up taking a grappling path, taking this smart approach, and probably finding a late finisher when Puna does gas.
Yeah, I think Bayza is a much better fighter than Puna, obviously. I think Bayza is a pretty good fighter. The biggest issue with him is he uses his size and reach to measure distance and doesn't really move his head. And so if you can close distance quickly, he's there to get cracked. And obviously, I'm a little hesitant to call him chinny, just because he got hurt by Matt Brown. Matt Brown's a huge hitter. He got knocked out by Chaos. Chaos is obviously a huge hitter, and he took a bunch of shots before getting knocked out. And he got knocked out by Fiallo, who's not a huge hitter, but he is a hitter. Power is probably the best thing he's got going for him. Don't get me wrong. I don't think it's good, and I have significant concerns about it. But I also think, like, contextualizing it, it's probably not as bad as it looks on paper. So
I would just say I would just cut you off not to cut you off real quick. But Andre Fiallo, like, to me, that just on paper that looks like an awful loss.
Oh, dude, I bet him against Fiallo. That fucking sucked. Yeah, I mean, I'm not betting him here. Don't get me wrong, but I do think he's the superior fighter in just about every phase. Personally, the big concern I have is, even though he's taller and longer than Puna, and he should be able to kind of just like rip him apart at range, Puna does cover distance like very quickly, especially early in fights. You know, his left hand is very, very fast. Doesn't have a whole lot past that left hand, but it is quick when he throws it, and he does tend to get in very, very quickly. And so I can envision in my head Puna landing the left heavy a few times early in this fight. And again, I am not as sold as Lags is that Bayza is chinny, but I'm not sold either. You know, I think that's the other part of it. I'm not like, oh, his shit's good. I think he could be chinny. I think we need a bit more data to get to there. So I do think Puna can have success early in this fight. But other than that, I'm with you. I mean, I think Bayza, if he can stay upright here, or not even stay upright, if he can avoid getting knocked out, he's going to butcher him and probably finish him down the stretch. What's the total? It's probably 1.5, right?
It is 1.5. And actually, that's the thing I would touch on. Actually, if anything, the over 1.5 is how I would look, if anything.
Yeah,
but it's going to be such an ass clencher.
It might be an ass clencher. I feel like Puna can take shots, or I feel like it really just comes down to Bayza, because like Puna's pretty tough, man. He's not easy to like hurt. You know, like Kopilov had to basically take a samurai sword to his body to eventually get him out of there.
But so yeah, I agree. It completely comes down to Bayza, whether he can take the shots or not.
I don't know. I mean, what's the GTD? That could be like very, very sweaty, but plus 220 kind of interests me. What's the Bayza decision?
Bayza decision. Yeah,
it's not that great. But yeah, over GTD kind of looks, I think, are pretty interesting. Moving on, fairly seems like there's a lot of interest in this fight. Julian Marquez, the Cuban missile prices, he's taking on Zachary Reese. Current price, Marquez is a favorite. He is minus 135. The comeback on Reese plus 115. Honestly, initially, I bet Marquez big at like plus 112, I believe, for like 3 units. And then like, because I'm very anti-Zachary Reese, as you know. I made it very clear how I felt about Zachary Reese when he made his debut. Yep. I bet Cody Brundage plus 240 against him. But I started thinking about it more, and all I've heard are like pro Marquez takes for it. When all I heard going into the Brundage fight was how, you know, Brundage is a wilty bum. You can't bet Brundage, even though that was one of the easier bets of like the last like 8 months or so. I don't mean in terms of how it played out, but I just mean like pre-fight. Like that, I never really had a doubt that Brundage was the side. And now suddenly the market's turning, and it does. Something I've noticed, like one of the bigger leaks I've had in my game is, you know, you fade one of these guys when their equity's there, right? But then it's like your instinct is, because you don't like them, to fade them again, even though the line has arguably fully corrected and maybe gone too far. And I think about this fight, and I'm like, is Julian Marquez really better than Cody Brundage? I'm not sure. He's tougher. He's tougher than Cody Brundage. That is definitely the case. But I think Cody Brundage had more skills that interested me. Like Julian, he's got a chin, he's got a ton of heart, and he'll keep coming at you until you put him down. But the guy, I mean, he's got no defense. His boxing is a lot of hooks. He doesn't really set up his shots well or pick them particularly well, in my opinion. I kind of think he's fairly easy to outmaneuver if you're composed. And I also think he's pretty easy to grapple. I mean, we saw Maki Pitolo easily outgrappling him, which, I mean, maybe Maki's a better wrestler than Zachary Reese. I'm not really sure, though, because Maki's not a great grappler himself. And on the Reese side, yeah, I think Reese is a fraud. I think he's a bum. But he is 4 inches taller. He is 5 inches longer. He is fast, and he hits pretty hard. And he has some, you know, I haven't really seen it from top position, but Reese seems to have relatively slick jiu-jitsu off bottom. And In the first fight, Reese's first fight, I felt like I was fading him with the guy where my worst case scenario was Brundage was the same level as Reese, and my best case scenario was he's a lot better. Whereas in this fight, I feel like my worst case scenario is Reese is better than the market is now thinking he is, and can easily just keep him on the outside and just kind of like destroy him with like body kicks and shots from out there. So I just don't think the same meat is there. So I cashed out of the bet. I do tend to lean to the Marquez side in this fight. I think the best time to fade Reese was last fight. I don't think Marquez is a guy you necessarily want to be laying a minus number on against a more athletic guy who's bigger and longer than him. What do you think?
Honestly, I think out of Reese catching him early in this fight, I think Marquez is the side because of a lot of the things that you have mentioned. The durability, the heart. I think he's got more finishing upside in general in the matchup. I think he's probably got better cardio of the two also. So honestly, when this was around minus 110, I had some interest at Marquez, but like minus 140, it's a pass. I'd rather honestly lay a similar number on the under 1.5.
It also feels to me like extremely mushed in like the same way, like you want to be buying low and selling high, you don't want to be,
right. The fight after where everybody's like, oh man, Zach Reese, he got slammed by Cody. Oh, it's
yeah.
Bet. Well, it's like, well, yeah, at minus 140, everybody's thinking that's the spot. Well, of course.
Right. That's what I'm saying. And I'll even go a step further. I am not bullish on Zachary Reese. I think he's quite poor. But market-wise, we didn't learn a lot from the Cody fight other than he has bad takedown defense, whereas Marquez is a terrible wrestler. Like I think Reese is probably the better wrestler of the two, So I just feel like people are jumping to fade this guy. And don't get me wrong, if he knocks out Marquez here in the first round or finishes him in the first and is minus 200 in the next fight, I'll probably fade him against any live body. But Marquez isn't plus 170, he's a favorite. Right. So
yep.
I'm okay with passing it. He seems mush to me. I have a feeling Reese is going to finish him. But I'm rooting for all our boys that are on the Marquez side here. So go Marquez. Next fight, this sucks. Bruno Ferrera, Dustin Stoltzfus. Bruno is a decent-sized favorite here. I believe he's like minus that. For whatever reason, Fight Odds isn't populating this. I see Pinnacle's got minus 267 with the comeback plus 220, so we'll use that as our guide here. What are your thoughts, Lags?
I mean, I think a lot of people are making some comparisons to the Stoltzfus and Puna fight, and I just think Puna's kind of a bum, and I think we've touched about that on this podcast a lot. Like, he's an overhand merchant, and that's about it. And don't get me wrong, Bruno is very similar in that sense. The guy hits very hard, mostly a round one KO merchant as well, but like I think he's much more skilled personally. I think Dustin's going to have a hard time grappling him early. Again, it's probably backloaded here in this fight, but I think he probably finds a knockout in the first round and a half.
Yeah, I mean, I faded Bruno last fight with Phil. Never goes well with Phil. But like Phil Hawes is like a much better fighter than Dustin Stoltzfus, Yeah, Phil Hawes doesn't have a chin, but he's a good kickboxer with power and wrestling and decent submission grappling, We're not getting that here. And you touched on the Puna fight, and yeah, Puna got predictable. Stoltzfus did a pretty good job over the course of that fight of hitting the body and then eventually kind of inserting his will with the grappling. But like prior to Puna starting to slow, he was landing hard on Stoltzfus every single time he let his hands go and wobbling him seemingly every time he let his hands go. And to me, this is true. Pepe said I played Hawes near pick him and Dustin is plus 2XX. But yeah, I mean, I think Hawes is way better than Dustin is. So, I mean, to me, I just feel like I mean, Dustin could do the same thing, if he can survive the early storm and kind of drag Bruno into deep waters, he could do all of that. But I actually thought Bruno did an okay job defensively grappling against Phil. And on the feet, he's just much quicker, much more dynamic, hits harder. I just see a ton of finishing equity in this fight on the Bruno side of things. And I think Dustin's finishing equity is more reliant on what Bruno's gas tank does, than anything else. So, yeah, I mean, I guess, Dustin, I shouldn't say I guess. Dustin could survive the storm and win this fight. But Dustin also looked gassed to shit against Rodolfo Vieira in round 3, I'm not sold he's got crazy cardio either. And I do know he's kind of fragile. So, I have no interest in this fight. If anything, like you wanted to take like a really contrarian take on this fight, I think something that won't hit, but not even at this price anymore. Price is gone. Oh no, actually it's still there. Bruno by decision plus 800. I kind of think is a little. I mean, it requires Dustin surviving the storm early or Bruno not death gassing and getting finished. I have this like sneaking suspicion though that Bruno, if he gets tired, might be able to wrestle himself and control Dustin on bottom. So we'll see. I could be wrong, but Bruno decision mildly intrigues me. I think he's going to take care of business pretty easily, though. Moving on, a rebooking. The coward, Raul Rosas Jr. He is currently minus 214, taking on Ricky Thsio plus 184. We all know that Raul Rosas got scared of the altitude and ran in Mexico. It's justice for Ricky this week. I have 3 units on Ricky at like plus 210 here. I mean, it's the same sizing I had last time. I might de-risk 1 unit just because it's not in Mexico and we don't have the elevation. But my breakdown hasn't really changed. I'm not going to – you guys can go back and find the UFC Mexico City breakdown if you want my full 10 to 12-minute breakdown. But basically, I think Raul could hurt him on the feet and knock him out early, potentially have big wrestling success early. But ultimately, I don't think he's good enough to consolidate top time against Ricky Thsio's better wrestlers than Raul have failed to do that. I expect Thsio's can keep scrambles rolling and keep, positions moving whenever they're scrambling on the mat, which I think eventually gasses Raul out here. On the feet, even though I think Thsio's is reckless and able to be hit, I think his striking is a bit better, his volume a bit more reliable. And on the mat, you saw what happened with Christian Rodriguez. And even the Mondo fight, he started gassing out in the back end of the Mondo fight. And, Christian Rodriguez kind of went for the body lock, or the body triangle, and Mondo just opted to pull guillotines. I expect Raul will be throwing lots of elbows and lots of ground and pound. That's a big difference between him and any of the guys that Raul has fought. Thsio just throws a ton of volume in all positions. And ultimately he's the more experienced fighter. I think, his three wins have all come against guys who, David Argueta, High Stand, and Natividad are all better wrestlers with better cardio than Raul Rosas. And frankly, also just more of men. And by that, I just mean that they're like all late 20s and very, very strong and physically built, whereas Raul Rosas is 20 years old, It might not even be 20 years old yet. So, yeah, I like Ricky here. I'm picking him outright to win. I'm pretty heavy on him. What do you think?
So I'll have some pushback there at least. I think Raul Rosas is a better grappler than Natividad.
Not a better wrestler, I promise you.
No,
I promise you.
I think
that's the.
I do think in this matchup, though, I think he's going to have more success there than Kevin did, and I think Raul probably. I should say probably. In my opinion, I think he finds a finish early, and I think that's probably where he needs. I'm saying.
How do you think he finishes him?
Probably on the mat.
So why do you think that?
Because I think he's going to get takedowns pretty easy. Don't get me wrong, Ricky's a good scrambler. But his defensive his takedown defense in general is not good.
Yeah, but he's fought way better submission grapplers than Raul Rosas, man. I'm telling you, it's. We'll see. We'll see what happens. We'll see.
But I don't disagree with your point of him slowing down in the back half. So I think his energy-intensive style is going to need him to find a finish in the early half in the fight. But I think he does.
We'll see. I do not agree with flags, but it could happen. Okay. I do think if Raul wins this fight and looks minus 200, it's likely coming on a finish in the front end of the fight. So we will see. Moving on, we have Dominic Reyes.
Hold on. Before we even get into this fight, because I'll offer you here, because we didn't do a Luis Nascimento shot bet, even though we did have that shot bet.
Who did we have? Who did I have?
Luis Nascimento.
But who? Oh, I owe you. I don't think I have.
Okay, no.
We'll do it next week.
But no. But how about this, John? On top of that, I will give you a 2-1 shot here, even 3-1
on Raul Rosas, on Ricky Thsio's.
Ricky wins. I'll get Ricky wins.
You're going to be drunk next week. You're going to be drunk next week. It better be good stuff, though.
All right.
That's all I'm saying.
What do you want me to get?
It better not be like Zambuca. I need either whiskey or tequila.
Fireball.
Fine, Fireball.
For Klein. Yep.
That's Pepe said who are the submission grapplers he's faced. I mean, he fought Brady Heastand, who I'd favor pretty comfortably against Raul personally. I'd favor Dan Argueta against Raul pretty comfortably as well. honestly. So, but we'll see. Maybe my take is wrong about that. Dan's a pretty good jiu-jitsu player too, man. I'm telling you. Like I feel Raul Rosas. Everybody's like, oh, he's got a bunch of subs. He's a great submission grappler. He's a good back taker. I haven't seen anything else he does that's particularly good at jiu-jitsu. Like he tends to lose position chest to chest all the time. Even on the back, if he can't lock down a body try, like the way Mondo was scrambling on him was pretty deeply concerning. Like most plus grapplers in the UFC are fucking owning Mondo Gutierrez, and he was continuing scrambles all fight with Ricky, or not Ricky, with Raul, and so which is one of the reasons I don't see why Ricky can't. Could Raul get better? Yeah, but what are the odds that a 19-year-old with 10 fights is, suddenly upgrading his game to being like top 30 in the UFC? I just don't think it's super likely, honestly. Moving on, we got Dominic Reyes, Dustin Jacobe. Current price, Jacobe minus 220, Reyes plus 185. What are your thoughts here? It's an interesting fight.
It is, and it gives me very similar vibes, in a sense, to the Cody Staman fight. And that, how can Jacobe be over 70% when, the guy's got decent volume, decent power, decent cardio. I don't think he's some massive finishing threat like the line's being made out to be. And I get, people will say, oh, like, Reyes is chinny, but then you look at the three Jan was landing hard body kicks before the knockout. Jiri was knocked out himself, and he landed a spinning elbow on him. Again, knocks out most of the guys in the division. And then Span, honestly, rewatching that fight, like Reyes' defense didn't look good at all. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But like him getting caught with that shot again, like that puts down most guys. So to me, it's more of a question of where's the durability at for Reyes, because hindsight, like post-fight here, I feel like, again, I think Pepe mentioned this earlier, or it might have been Chad earlier in the week. Hindsight's is going to look very easy. Either Reyes plus 200 is going to look like a very, very easy bet, or it's like, okay, well, his chin's not there. We kind of knew this, and Jacobe probably was aside. So I'm passing, but it's Reyes or pass.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. I'm passing as well. I do.
I mean, look, if I like the over 1.5 too.
I like the over 2.5. Honestly, I was gonna say that I like the GTD here a bit, but it's kind of tough because I kind of want to bet Reyes just because it does feel like going from
just a massive market overcorrection
to Span and John Jones and Blachowicz to Jacobe, a guy who should have lost to Maxime Grishin, feels like a huge market overcorrection. The other side of that is I do know he's had serious health problems, and I've heard stuff out of the cage from people that hasn't been on Twitter that, I'm not going to repeat here, but the guy probably shouldn't be fighting from what I've heard. I think you saw the same thing. One of our friends posted it. So, knowing that his own team doesn't think he's really fit to be fighting is probably enough for me to not want to bet him at plus 190. If I got the plus 250, I'd probably do it. Because stylistically, I don't think Jacobe is going to have an easy time voluming up Reyes. He's just not a guy who cedes volume, He's not a guy it's easy to get volume off on. And historically, he has been fast and hits hard. And I do think he can crack Jacobe coming into range here a few times. But with all of that said, look, Reyes is 34. His chin seems like it might be going pretty severely. To your point, I'm not concerned about the Jiri knockout. I'm not concerned about the Jan knockout. Him going out to a jab against Span seemed deeply concerning to me, though. So it does seem like his chin is kind of on the way out here. So yeah, I think Jacobe is just a more reliable fighter at this point in his career. Again, like if he didn't have all the health issues and whatnot, I'd be betting him here. Like it is a market overcorrection, but he has had the health issues and he hasn't been fighting. And the last 2 times we've seen him in the cage, it's ended ugly and violently. But in all, I'm with you. I like the over. I like the GTD. It could be dicey, especially after all this shit I just said about Reyes' chin. Except I kind of think Jacobe is going to kind of play it the way he did with Menifee. Like, if you rewatch the Menifee fight, he was very point fighty. He wasn't doing his normal, like, tons of volume type game. And I kind of think you might see a similar approach from him here. On top of which, Reyes' cardio isn't the best and tends to start, draining past like 7 minutes. So I kind of think if it clears the first like 7 minutes here, it's probably going to get 15 pretty easily. So yeah, I like the over in the GTD. I haven't bet anything yet, but it's a pass for me. I'm with you. It's probably Reyes or pass. I just can't get enthusiastic about him at this juncture in his career.
Yep.
Moving on, main event, another interesting fight here. Nassourdine Imavov, minus 125. Comeback on Cannonier, plus 105. I don't know. I actually think it's kind of like favorite or pass here on the Imavov side, to be honest. And my reasoning for saying that is just, look, if these guys fought 3 months after Cannonier fought Strickland, I'd obviously bet Cannonier at this price, right? But Cannonier hasn't fought in over a year, like well over a year at this point. It's been about 18 months, right? I'm pretty sure. Strickland was his last fight, I'm pretty sure, right?
Vittori was his last fight.
Okay. So it's been more
Vittori
like a year.
Was his last fight, so it's been almost a year. So it was June 17th. Yep.
Right. Okay, so it's been about a year since Jared fought. He's 40. He's like 40 and a half at this point. He's coming off an MCL tear. I do think he's got some interesting tools in the context of this fight. Obviously, very, very good leg kicker, very good get-up game, and very strong power. But again, it's like we're getting to the point with him at 185 where the wheels are going to fall off at some point, like sooner than later in all likelihood. And now he's getting injured and stuff. And he's taking on a guy in Imavov who I've never been super high on because, Imavov seems to fight close with everybody. But whatever you want to say about Imavov, if he's a very good athlete, he's a very strong technical kickboxer, very strong wrestler. And at the end of the day, he's 29, training at, I'm always skeptical of French MMA, but if you're going to be in France, the MMA factory is the place to be. Like, he's at least getting bodies that he's working with, so he should be getting better still. I thought his last fight against Dolidze was actually quite impressive. Dolidze, I know he gets a lot of shit, but the guy just has a way of making his game work, and Imavov shut it down completely. My biggest concern for Imavov whenever he fights is I think his cardio is a bit sketchy, but I also think you kind of have to push him to start gassing. Like, if you go back and watch Imavov Strickland, Strickland did what he did with Costa. He didn't let him have a break for the entire fight. Like, that's how Strickland fights. You're going to have to use energy every second of every minute of an entire fight. That's not really how Jared fights. He's much more about looking for the right shots and picking his shots than he is going like crazy aggressive. He did go crazy aggressive against Vittori, but I think that had more to do with the fact that he was landing everything he threw at Vittori than anything else. And so I think about this, and to me, it seems pretty likely to be fairly tepid. I do think Imavov is a better kickboxer. I think he's slightly better technical striker. And I think he has more improvement upside, and Jared's got a lower floor. On top of which, it seems like Jared's the most popular dog of the week. Everybody's betting him, and no one's talking about. He is the mush of the week. That's a fact.
I know.
That is a fact. And no one's talking about the fact that he's 40 years old, coming off a major knee surgery, which seems pretty relevant against taking on a 29-year-old young buck who's a dynamic athlete. So my pick's Imavov. I don't know if I'll bet him. I'm kind of watching it because it does seem like, the Cannonier money keeps on coming. I'd probably take a dog shot on Imavov. Glenbot says, is Imavov late sub props worth a look? I'd actually be more inclined to think about early sub props, to be honest, just because I think Imavov's a lot less likely to grapple late than he is to grapple early. But I actually think sub is an interesting look. Jared's pretty minds his P's and Q's, but he's gotten put in some bad spots before. What do you think, Legs?
Not that I'm ignoring, the fact that Jared is 40 and coming off of the MCL injury, but I lean Jared's side here just because, first, the cardio in general in 5 rounds. I think the later rounds favor Jared here. I think the leg kicks are a massive weapon for him. He's got huge power. To me, I feel like this is a fairly close fight, and I don't think either guy's going to separate a ton over 25 minutes, personally. I think Jared of the two is likelier to finish, in my opinion. But yeah.
So that's kind of like the weird thing for me, right? Because Jared's gotten hurt a bunch lately, and my initial instinct was the same as you. Jared's much more likely to finish him. And then the more I thought about it and watched, Vittori hurt him bad early in that fight. Brunson hurt him very badly in their fight.
Robbed it too.
And Imavov, has he been badly hurt in the UFC? I can't think of I guess I remember Jordan Williams headbutted him and hurt him, but I can't remember. I mean, even late against Buckley. Yeah, he wasn't. And he took Buckley's shots and Hawes's shots like pretty fine. So I kind of think it's probably where we part ways here is I think Imavov does have a bit more finishing upside in this fight, whereas I don't know. We'll see, though. It's an interesting fight. It's a pretty good main event. Honestly, I kind of like this card in general.
I was going to say the last thing there to our point of discussing on who has more finishing upside. So right now, Imavov no scorecards is taking some steam, and it's minus 135.
Yeah, I kind of lean that way. Yeah, I mean, this is kind of a nice way to kick off the stretch run. Well, not the stretch run, but the midseason run here up to what we thought was going to be McGregor Chandler, but now is going to be. Maybe. Yeah, and what Pepe said. If you that's actually pretty interesting because when you watch the Strickland fight, Strickland was seemingly landing huge combos in the pocket on him, and he just seemed to be kind of rolling all of them fairly easily.
Yeah. I think GTD might not be a bad look for the fight in general. Yeah. I think both guys are fairly durable.
But yeah, I mean, what are they going to do with the McGregor fight, man? Like, I don't even know what she'd replace that with. Like that, so it's kind of.
I've seen a lot of like rumbling. So hear me out of all of these and let me know what you think. Chandler Oliveira 2.
Yeah. On a pay-per-view main event, or is it going to turn into a fight night?
Probably a pay-per-view main event, right? It's not going to change, right?
I mean,
I know, but like,
that's kind of crazy.
Well, it's crazy. Honestly, I feel bad for the people that already bought the tickets.
Yeah, they're the ones who got fucked the worst here.
Right. But so
what else have you heard?
So that was the one rumor, and then this was another one. I just saw. I be honest, I can't remember if it's Chet Steamroller's brother. He put Chandler and BSD.
I mean, that's a great fight night main event.
Yeah,
it's not a great $80 main. I mean, this is not saying. I feel like. I don't think Chandler's going to take the fight, though. I mean, the guy has been waiting for. Like, what happens if Chandler pulls out? You know what they need to do?
What if Chandler loses this fight? Whoever it might be.
That's what I'm saying, though. I don't think Chandler's going to take the fight. He has so much to lose by taking the fight. Yeah. I was like, against Charles, like, he's going to be a dog to Charles. Why would he? Like, a decent-sized dog in all likelihood if he fights Charles. Like, what do you do if Chandler's just like, yeah, no, I'm not fighting a replacement?
Yeah.
Tough. You know what you got to do? Drop a sack of cash off at Tom Aspinall and Curtis Blade's door and be like, get in fucking camp, guys. We need you in 3 weeks. That is, I know they're supposed to be fighting at the end of July, but that to me, that seems like you can't, there are only like 2 to 3 guys in the whole sport who can headline a pay-per-view without a title, and Michael Chandler is not anywhere near that list.
Derek Lewis.
Neither is Charles.
I'm kidding.
Bring Derek. Daniel Cormier and Stipe 4.
Yeah, give him a bag. Yeah, but no, I totally agree with you there. There's not a ton of guys that could replace that fight and put it in there. It's like, oh yeah, that's perfect main event, UFC 303.
Like, maybe it's not a horrible call.
Saryukian? I mean,
what are you going to do it for, though? Is it going to be for the interim title? Like, Islam just fought on Saturday. Like, you can't make an interim. I mean, I guess you could. It's the UFC. It's like WWE, basically. But Kayla Harrison versus Nunes is one of the possibilities, I guess.
Yeah, that's awful.
But
you mean Kayla Harrison, Eileen Perez?
I would sign up for that.
Did you see that?
I did see that. I did see that with her saying that, like, if she did judo from an early age, she'd be an Olympian.
Yeah, she said judo was pretty much a joke. I'm like, okay.
I mean, honestly, like, the card itself, if it was a fight night, isn't bad. Like, Hill Olberg, I mean, Piper Barriott, Paige Gary, Swanson Feely. It's actually a pretty decent card from a watchability standpoint. It's just not what you really want to pay for a pay-per-view. So
yep, literally.
I don't know. I guess we'll see. But yeah, we'll be doing it until then. I mean, we'll find out. We will be trying to. Tim Troiano saying I wouldn't pay for Kayla Nunes at Lags $80.
I wouldn't either.
I would not either, and I usually pay for them just because I feel like I have to do my part for the sport. But This is one of those cases.
Yeah, I was like, to get a little off topic here. That's literally, I was talking with one of my coworkers today about that card, and he's like, "Oh man, yeah, like I'm probably gonna." He was talking about like watching the last card with Moxley. He's like, yeah, I streamed it. Yeah, the stream eventually got kind of laggy, but I'm definitely gonna pay for the Connor card. And I was like, "Oh, tough news for you. Connor might not even be on the card." He's like, "Oh, what?" And then I was telling him about it. He's like, "I would definitely buy that card though, because all the casuals are gonna tune in, and it's gonna be super laggy." But that's kind of the thing we're talking about.
It kind of fucks or sucks because like. I mean, or maybe it's a good thing because I didn't really want to see Connor fight anyway. He's kind of what got me into the sport, as embarrassing as it is. Yeah, but I just feel like he's done, So
I do too, but that's a good comeback fight with Chandler. Personally, I think, headspace right for McGregor. I think it's probably a decent fight for him.
Is his headspace right? Have you seen the videos?
No, it's not. Of course it's not.
Bro,
no, I know. He's literally partying.
I will put it to you this way. He's partying like most of the guys that I know in New York City who grossly abuse drugs. That is how he is acting. As someone who's never abused drugs. Anyway, though, guys, we'll be back next week. We got Alex Perez, Tatsuro Taira, great card. Actually, I want to know about great card, but great main event. There's a couple really cool fights on that card. We'll be back to chat about that next week, 7 p.m., same time. A lot of bets this weekend. Good luck, everybody, if you're following, if you're fading. Please drop a like, subscribe, and go to fightnumbers.com. Sign up for a membership. Use the promo code CLUB for 30% off. You get access to Pepe, Evan, and Ozzy's picks, and you get John's live tool and Chad's picks and the optimizer. You get their optimizer. You get John's DFS projections, which many people have told me are the best in the business. That's what I've heard from many, many people.
He's very good
on both sides. We're gonna do it. So, fight numbers, promo code CLUB. Good luck on your bets this weekend. As always, you can find me on Twitter, John at MMA Fox, Lags at Danny _Lags. We'll see you next week, everybody. Peace.